The sky above the dense forest rippled with a strange shimmer as a massive dark shape pierced the heavens. The air hummed with a deep resonating vibration, like the sound of an approaching storm, but far more menacing. The object descended slowly. At first its shape, hard to define against the clouds, it grew larger as it cut through the atmosphere, roaring with the force of 100 jet engines. The trees below shook with the impact as the ship finally made contact with the earth, the ground buckling beneath the weight of the craft, like a massive creature crashing through the woods. A chill swept over the forest as the craft settled into the earth, its surface cool and smooth like polished stone. The air around it seemed to crackle with an electric tension, an unnatural silence. Falling in its wake, the predators aboard the ship shifted in their seats, their alien eyes glowing faintly as they surveyed the planet below. Their sensors flared to life, mapping the terrain. Their target had already been chosen. Earth was a rich hunting ground full of prey with instincts too primitive to resist the thrill of the chase. The predators had been here before on other worlds, but this one felt different. The leader of the hunters, a towering figure with dark exoskeletal plating, glanced at the others, his sharp features framed by an alien helmet. His lips curled into a grin as he spoke in their native tongue, his voice a low growl. The hunt begins now. We find them, we take them one by one. They will not escape, not this time. His subordinates nodded in unison as they gathered their weapons designed for one purpose, only to kill with ruthless efficiency. They were skilled beyond any measure known to humans, each one equipped with cloaking devices, stealth tech, and weaponry that could tear through metal and flesh alike. They disembarked from the ship one by one, their feet landing silently on the soft earth, their cloaks flickering to life as they blended seamlessly with the environment. Invisible to the naked eye, their eyes scanned the forest ahead, tracking the smallest movements, the faintest sound. The predators were methodical in their approach. They had studied their prey from afar for weeks, watching from the shadows, learning the rhythms of the world. The humans had no idea what was coming. They had no idea that their very lives were being measured against the cool precision of an alien hunter's gaze. Deep in the forest, a solitary figure stood watching the stars as he had done many nights. Before it, his name was Sam, a tracker of sorts, living far away from the modern world. He had long ago abandoned the noise of the city, the chaos of human society, to live alone in nature. He had learned to survive in the wilderness without the luxuries most people took for granted. He could read the tracks of animals, understand the language of the trees, and know when the weather was about to change. He had never encountered anything quite like what was coming now. As he scanned the sky, he felt an unease settle in his stomach. Something about the way the stars seemed to flicker unnaturally sent a shiver down his spine. He turned away from the sky and peered into the darkening woods. His instincts screamed at him that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Something was moving out there, something intelligent, something that wasn't supposed to be in these woods. Sam grabbed his rifle and moved silently into the trees, his eyes sharp, his ears attuned to the slightest sound. His hunt was about to begin. But this time he wasn't the predator, he was the prey. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came when Sam heard a sound, a sharp snap of a branch breaking in the distance. He froze, his breath catching in his throat. His instincts screamed at him to stay still, but his mind raced with thoughts of what it could be, a bear, maybe, or something bigger than he'd ever encountered before. He crouched low against a tree and slowly unslung his rifle. His hands were steady, but his pulse hammered in his ears. He waited and watched the trees around him shifting with the wind, but there was no other movement, nothing to explain the noise. Seconds passed that felt like hours, then the air seemed to shift. It became heavier, like the forest itself was holding its breath. And that's when he saw it, a shimmer, a distortion in the air just ahead, where the trees thinned out into a small clearing. His heart skipped a beat as he realized what he was seeing wasn't some trick of the light. It was something else, something moving through the air as if it was there, but also not there, something cloaked, something invisible. His rifle's scope adjusted automatically as he trained it on the spot where the shimmer hovered. He could just make out the faintest outline of a figure, a shape too tall and too wide to be human. He knew instinctively that this was no animal, no natural predator. This was something else entirely. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as the figure slowly emerged from its invisibility, its form becoming more solid. The alien stood there for only a moment, its body covered in dark exoskeletal armor, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. The predator was every bit as terrifying as he had imagined, a being designed for one purpose: to kill. Sam's training kicked in before his fear could take root. He moved quickly, darting behind cover and aiming his rifle at the creature. But before he could pull the trigger, a second alien appeared from the shadows, and then another and another, until the clearing was filled with these deadly beings, each one cloaked and armed to the teeth. They moved with the silence of ghosts, their eyes sweeping over the landscapes, searching for anything that might pose a threat. They were hunting. His breath caught in his throat as he realized they weren't just looking for him, they were looking for everyone. They were looking for humans. They were the ones who had come to hunt him and everyone else in the area. Sam's pulse quickened, his mind raced. He needed to get back to the others, warn them, but there was no way they believe him. No time to explain. He'd have to show them the only way he knew how, with action, and even then it might be too late to survive. He darted back through the trees, moving as silently as possible, but his mind was already working on a plan. He knew this forest better than any of them. He knew every trail, every hidden spot. He could use the land to his advantage. He could fight back, maybe not alone, but with the right people. They had a chance. They had to. As he reached the edge of the clearing, Sam glanced back over his shoulder at the predators. They hadn't noticed him, yet their attention still focused on the space around them. Their advanced technology making them nearly impossible to detect. They were predators in every sense of the word, but Sam wasn't going to be their prey, not if he could help it. He disappeared into the underbrush, blending with the shadows of the trees, his mind already on the next move. And as the predators advanced through the forest with deadly purpose, Sam knew the time for hiding was over. The hunt was on. Sam moved swiftly through the dense underbrush, his every step deliberate, careful not to make a sound. His thoughts were already racing ahead, mentally mapping the terrain. The aliens were ruthless, intelligent, and technologically superior, but they had one weakness: overconfidence. They thought of themselves as the apex predators of the universe, unchallenged, unbeatable. What they didn't know was that humans, too, had an unyielding will to survive, a spirit forged in centuries of hardship and adversity. It was that very tenacity that had kept Sam alive in the wild for so long. He reached the small cabin where he had been living, a simple structure nestled in a hollowed-out valley that he had chosen for its isolation. The cabin was nearly invisible to anyone who didn't know exactly where to look. Its walls were camouflaged with moss and vines, and the entrance was hidden behind a waterfall. Sam quickly slid into the cabin and grabbed the weathered map of the surrounding wilderness. He studied the layout for a moment, noting the areas where the predators might be patrolling and the routes he could take to evade them. He could already hear the faint sounds of their pursuit in the distance, their advanced technology likely helping them track his movements, but they hadn't yet learned how to track his mind. The cabin was small but had enough supplies to last Sam for months. He packed what he could: ammunition, some basic tools, a few homemade explosives, and a rifle that had seen better days but was still more than capable of taking down anything that moved. He took a deep breath, adjusting the strap over his shoulder. His training was kicking in now, the years of living alone in the wild sharpening his focus. The predators might have the technology, but they lacked the one thing Sam had: a deep, intimate knowledge of the land. Just as he was about to leave, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the trees outside, their unnatural quiet broken by a faint humming noise. Sam's heart raced. They were getting closer. He quickly gathered himself and slipped out of the cabin, moving toward a nearby ridge that overlooked the valley. From this high vantage point, he could see the figures of the aliens below, their cloaked forms barely visible through the thick trees. They were hunting in packs now, scanning the ground for any sign of movement. He counted at least 5 of them, their weapons outstretched, the sharp gleam of their blades reflecting the dim light of the setting sun. He wasn't sure how much time he had, but he couldn't afford to waste any. His only chance was to warn the others, other survivors who had taken refuge in the surrounding woods, people who had learned how to live off the land just as he had. Together, they could stand a chance, but they needed to be prepared, and they needed to act fast. He knew this was no ordinary hunt. This was something far more dangerous, an invasion, a slaughter in the making. The ridge curved sharply around the valley, providing Sam with the perfect opportunity to cut across the predator's path. He moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows and staying low to the ground. Every so often, he stopped to listen for any signs of movement, holding his breath until the noise passed. As he neared the next ridge, he saw movement in the distance. Another survivor, a woman named Elle, was making her way toward him. She was one of the most resourceful people he knew, and the two of them had worked together before, but they had no idea what they were up against now. Sam signaled to her, and she froze, her eyes scanning the area. He waved her over, and after a tense moment, she darted toward him, her face pale with fear but determined. They didn't have much time. The predators were still out there, and the hunt was far from over. Sam leaned in, whispering urgently. "We need to warn the others," he said. "They're not just hunting animals. They're hunting us." Elle nodded grimly. She understood, and together they would make sure the aliens learned what it meant to face humanity's greatest weapon, survival. As Sam and Elle made their way deeper into the forest, they kept low and moved swiftly, barely making a sound. The predators had already begun their sweep of the area, and though they hadn't spotted the two survivors yet, Sam knew it was only a matter of time before they would be discovered. The aliens were methodical, calculating, but they weren't infallible. Humans were their equal in one key area: resourcefulness. Sam had lived through more than his fair share of dangers, and now he was about to turn the forest into a weapon. The first step was to gather the others. Sam knew there were a few survivors who lived in the area, people who had retreated to the wilderness years ago, after society had crumbled. They were tough, self-sufficient, and they understood the land in ways that even Sam sometimes marveled at. If anyone had a chance against these aliens, it was them. They just needed to be unified and prepared. "We're going to need to move fast," Sam muttered, glancing back at Elle. "If we're going to do this right, we'll need everyone. No one gets left behind." Elle nodded, her eyes steely. "Agreed. We've got one shot at this." They reached the first hideout at dusk, a camouflage bunker dug into the side of a steep hill. It was well hidden, the entrance nearly impossible to find unless you knew exactly where to look. Sam knocked 3 times in a rhythmic pattern, the code he'd established with the other survivors. Moments later, a crack in the earth opened, revealing a small group of ragtag survivors led by a grizzled man named Rolf. Rolf was a former soldier, and though age had weathered him, his experience was invaluable. "What's going on?" Rolf's voice was low, gruff, and filled with concern as he motioned for Sam and Elle to enter. "You two look like you've seen ghosts." "Worse," Sam replied, looking over his shoulder to make sure no one was tailing them. "Worse than ghosts. Predators, alien predators. They've come to hunt us." Rolf's eyes narrowed, disbelief flashing across his face. "Alien? You mean like from the sky?" Elle cut in, her voice steady but urgent. "Yes, from the sky. They've been tracking us, picking us off one by one. We need to move now. We can't stay here." The survivors exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of the situation sinking in. But Rolf's experience kicked in, and after a long pause, he nodded. "All right, what's the plan?" "We're setting a trap," Sam said, his voice firm. "These things think they're untouchable, but they don't know this land. We can use their overconfidence against them. We'll need every hand, every resource, and a hell of a lot of luck." The group gathered quickly, preparing to leave their hideout behind. Sam laid out his plan, simple but effective. They would use the forest's natural terrain to their advantage, setting traps and ambush points that would force the aliens into vulnerable positions. The predators relied on their advanced technology to track prey, but they hadn't accounted for one thing: the unpredictability of human ingenuity. The first trap would be a series of decoy heat signatures, a trick Sam had learned from his years in the wild. They would rig up makeshift thermals to create false trails, misdirecting the aliens and leading them into a labyrinth of natural pitfalls. They'd also need to work together to disarm the predator's cloaking tech. If they could take one down, they could use its gear to turn the tables. "We'll work in pairs," Sam continued, his eyes scanning the faces of the group. two-man teams, one to draw them in, the other to take them out. We move quietly, stay hidden, and strike when the time's right. Any questions? The survivors nodded, their faces hardening with resolve. Sam could see the fear in their eyes, but it was paired with something else: determination, a will to fight back. They moved out just as night began to fall, using the cover of darkness to slip through the trees. Sam led the group toward the first of many ambush sites, each one designed to mislead the alien hunters, throwing them off course and making them feel more and more confident as the humans remained elusive. But Sam knew that this wasn't just about traps and tactics. This was a battle for survival, for the future of their kind. The predators may have been the hunters, but they hadn't realized just how fiercely humanity could fight when backed into a corner. And Sam was ready to prove it. The night was still and heavy with anticipation, the silence of the forest pressing in on the group as they moved deeper into the trees. The faint glow of distant stars barely illuminated their path, but they didn't need much light. The darkness was their ally now. Sam led the way, his instincts sharp, guiding the group toward the first of the traps they had set. The air felt thick with tension as the survivors moved in synchronized silence, knowing they had little time before the predators would pick up their scent or detect the heat signatures they had planted earlier. As they reached their first position, Sam took a moment to assess the surroundings. A thick thicket of brambles and tangled roots formed the perfect choke point. If the aliens followed the false trail they had laid, they would be funneled directly into the trap. The survivors had rigged up tripwires and hidden pits, tools scavenged from their environment, and repurposed for one singular goal: to neutralize the predators. Everyone in position, Sam whispered, his voice barely audible above the rustling of the trees. Remember, no mistakes. We get one shot at this. The group spread out, each person taking their place. Sam and Elle took cover behind a cluster of boulders, their eyes scanning the perimeter for any signs of movement. The rest of the team positioned themselves in the surrounding trees, each armed with a weapon or a tool to help disable the predators' tech if they managed to get close. Hours passed, the only sounds the occasional snap of twigs underfoot or the distant hoot of an owl. Sam's nerves were taut, every muscle in his body ready to spring into action. The survivors had made sure to leave no trace of their presence. Every footprint was covered, every scent masked. The predators had no idea they were being lured into a trap. And then it came. A soft rustle in the distance, the faintest glimmer of light reflecting off something metallic. Sam's heart skipped a beat. The aliens had arrived. The first predator, tall and imposing, appeared at the edge of the thicket, its cloaking device flickering as it made its way cautiously into the clearing. It moved with the precision of a hunter, its glowing eyes scanning the area as it advanced. Sam held his breath, watching every move. This was the moment. With a quick nod, Sam signaled to the group. The trap was sprung. The predator's foot landed on a hidden tripwire, and in an instant, the ground beneath it gave way. The alien fell into the pit, its scream echoing through the trees as the sharp wooden stakes that lined the bottom of the hole impaled it with brutal force. The group was silent, their eyes locked on the fallen predator as it struggled to break free, its cloaking device malfunctioning as it flailed. But it was too late. Rolf was the first to act, emerging from his hiding spot and charging toward the downed alien. He had been the one to design the trap, and now his quick reflexes came into play. With a swift movement, Rolf pulled a device from his belt, a crude but effective EMP pulse generator, and activated it. The predator's cloaking device flickered out of existence as the pulse short-circuited its tech. For the first time, they saw it clearly. Its exoskeleton was sleek and dark, its alien eyes wide with rage as it tried to regain control of its malfunctioning systems. Sam and Elle moved in, their weapons drawn. Sam's hands were steady as he aimed at the alien's head. Without hesitation, he pulled the trigger. The blast from the rifle was loud in the stillness of the forest, the shot precise. The predator collapsed, its body twitching in its final moments before it fell still. A cheer rippled through the survivors, but Sam held up a hand, signaling for silence. They weren't done yet. The hunt was still on, and the aliens would not take their defeat lightly. There was no time for celebration. "They know we're here now," Sam said quietly. "We've got to move. They'll be back with reinforcements." Rolf nodded grimly. "We've got a taste of their blood. Let's make sure they know who the real prey is." The group quickly stripped the fallen predator of its tech, taking what they could use to turn the tide of the fight. Sam knew this was just the beginning. One predator down, but they were far from safe. The others would be more cautious now, more determined. But the humans had shown they could fight back, and for the first time since the predators arrived, Sam allowed himself a fleeting sense of hope. This was just the start of a much larger battle. The thrill of victory was short-lived, the weight of the next moves settling heavily on Sam's shoulders. The forest, once a place of solace, now felt like an oppressive trap, and Sam couldn't shake the feeling that the predators were already regrouping, adjusting their strategies. The successful ambush had shown them the aliens weren't invincible, but it had also made one thing clear. These hunters were relentless. "We move fast," Sam muttered as he gestured for the survivors to continue, stripping the fallen predator of its tech. They needed to act quickly before the other aliens adapted to their tactics. Rolf, already working with a precision born of years of experience, pulled out a small toolkit and began examining the aliens' weaponry. Elle knelt beside him, her eyes scanning the perimeter. "Do you think they'll come for us directly?" she asked, her voice low but laced with tension. Sam didn't answer immediately. His thoughts were racing. He had studied predators all his life. Nature's predators, not these alien hunters, but the instincts were the same. Once a predator knew it was being hunted, it changed. It adapted. But this wasn't just an animal in the woods. These were intelligent, calculating beings with technology far beyond their own. They weren't just going to attack, they were going to learn, and that made them even more dangerous. "They'll adapt," Sam said finally, his voice grim. "And they'll come for us in full force. But we can use their tactics against them. We need to stay one step ahead." The survivors were already busy preparing for their next move. They gathered what they could from the fallen alien, taking the device that had temporarily disabled its cloaking tech. It was a crude, hand-built EMP generator, but Sam had no doubt it would give them an edge if they could get close enough to another predator. The group set to work quickly, packing up what they could use from the alien's technology: blades, energy weapons, and even the cloaking device itself, which they hoped to reverse engineer. Sam's mind raced as they worked. If they could take down one more predator, perhaps they could turn the tide, find a way to use its technology to counter the others. But that meant getting close, and getting close meant taking risks. They would need to rely on stealth, on their ability to move through the forest unseen. He looked at the others, their faces hard with determination. They were ready, but Sam knew that even with all their preparation, luck was as much a factor as anything. "Let's move," Sam said, his voice cold but steady. "We're not waiting around for them to regroup. We push into their territory, get them off balance. They won't expect us to come to them." The group moved quickly, spreading out to avoid detection, but always staying within sight of one another. They took alternate routes, circling through the treaties in an effort to confuse the predators, and in doing so, they inadvertently drew the aliens into the area where they had set their next trap. By now, Sam could hear the soft, deliberate hum of the predators' cloaking technology, a faint buzz in the air that gave their positions away just enough. The aliens were getting closer, working together as a unit to comb the area. Sam's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to remain calm. This was what he had prepared for. They reached the next kill zone, a series of low-hanging branches rigged with sharp, steel-tipped wire that would entangle anything moving beneath them. The survivors took their positions, hiding in the brush or behind trees. Sam felt the weight of the rifle in his hands, his senses heightened. He could hear the aliens now, the faint clicks of their feet on the forest floor. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. And then they appeared, two predators, their cloaks shimmering as they advanced with a practiced ease, scanning the ground for any signs of life. They moved in tandem, alert but unaware of the trap waiting just ahead. Sam's heart pounded as he watched, waiting for the perfect moment. The aliens were getting closer, moving into position. The first predator stepped right into the path of the rigged branches, its foot snagging a tripwire. Now, Sam whispered, and the trap was sprung. The wires snapped taut, catching the alien mid-step. It let out a shrill cry as it was yanked upward, its body twisting in the air, entangled in the sharp wires. The second predator turned toward the noise, but it was too late. Rolf was already moving, his rifle raised, and with a precise shot, the second alien collapsed, its body twitching in the last moments of its life. The survivors held their breath as the first predator struggled, but it was already weakening. Sam quickly advanced, pulling out the EMP device. He triggered it, sending a pulse that disabled the alien's cloaking device. It went still, and the fight was over. For the moment anyway, but Sam knew better than to celebrate. There were still more predators out there, and now they would be even more determined to hunt them down. "We've got them on the ropes," Sam said quietly, but his voice was filled with urgency. "But we need to keep moving. They won't stop until we're all dead." The forest had become a battlefield, the once serene landscape now tainted with the weight of their fight for survival. Sam's pulse was steady, but his mind never stopped moving, calculating the next move, the next trap. He could feel the presence of the remaining predators, lurking in the shadows, ever watchful. He knew it was only a matter of time before they would retaliate in force, and that time was fast approaching. The survivors moved deeper into the heart of the woods, their path winding through thick groves and steep ravines. Each step was measured, calculated as they followed the plan Sam had crafted, every move designed to keep the aliens on the back foot. They weren't just running, they were hunting now, and the predators had no idea they were walking into their next nightmare. Sam took a moment to glance around the faces of the survivors. They were tired, covered in dirt and sweat, but their eyes burned with the same resolve that had gotten them this far. They were fighters, every single one of them. And though they had lost so much already, they had something the aliens would never understand: a connection to this land, an innate understanding of how to move unseen, how to outsmart, outlast, and outfight their adversaries. As they approached a rocky outcrop overlooking a narrow canyon, Sam stopped and signaled for the group to take cover. From this vantage point, he could see the predators moving through the trees below, their cloaking devices shimmering faintly, their movements precise and deliberate. The aliens were circling, methodically searching for any sign of the survivors. Sam's eyes narrowed as he studied their pattern. They were coming closer, but they were still too scattered, too cautious. They hadn't realized that Sam and his team had become the hunters. He motioned for Elle to move forward, her role clear in the plan. She was quick and stealthy, one of the best when it came to close-quarters ambushes. She would slip past the predators, get close, and then trigger the next part of the trap, a flashbang attached to a tripwire. The goal was to disorient the aliens, giving the survivors an opening to strike. "Ready?" Sam whispered to her, keeping his voice low. Elle gave him a sharp nod, her hand tightening around the knife she carried. There was no fear in her expression, only the calm focus of someone who had lived in the wild long enough to know what was at stake. Elle moved like a shadow, slipping from cover to cover with practiced ease. Sam watched as she crept closer to the predators, her form blending with the trees around her. He held his breath, every nerve on edge. The trap was set, and now it was a waiting game. The first predator came into view, its cloaking device barely flickering. Sam could hear its breathing, shallow and mechanical, as it scanned the area. Elle was only a few yards away, nearly within striking distance. Sam's eyes tracked the predator, his finger hovering over the trigger of his rifle. But he didn't pull it, not yet. The time wasn't right, not until Elle signaled. Then, in one smooth motion, Elle dropped to the ground and activated the tripwire. A bright flash of light erupted in the air, blinding the predator. It staggered backward, disoriented, and temporarily blinded. The rest of the aliens froze, their cloaking devices flickering erratically as they tried to regroup. Sam didn't hesitate. He signaled the others, and the survivors sprang into action. Rolf and the others flanked the predators, cutting off any chance of retreat. The element of surprise was on their side, and Sam was determined to capitalize on it. The battle that followed was brutal, quick, and ruthless. The predators, though formidable, were disoriented by the flashbang and out of sync with their cloaking devices. The survivors used the opportunity to strike, their rifles and blades finding their marks. Sam's heart raced as he fired, taking down one predator with a clean shot to the head. Rolf was beside him, dispatching another with swift efficiency. But the predators weren't done. They fought back viciously, their alien strength and speed on full display. One of the survivors, Mark, took a blow to the chest, falling to the ground with a grunt. Sam's heart lurched, but there was no time to dwell on it. They had to keep moving. Another predator advanced, its energy weapon crackling to life, but Sam was faster. He fired first, hitting the alien square in the chest. It collapsed, its weapon sparking as it fell. In the chaos, the survivors pushed forward, drawing the remaining predators into their final trap. A small ravine, hidden beneath thick vines and moss, created a narrow choke point. As the last predator attempted to retreat, it found itself caught in the snare they'd set. No way forward, no way back. Sam closed in, his rifle trained on the alien. The predator was cornered, its cloaking device failing, its eyes glowing with fury. It hissed, its weapon raised in one final desperate move. But Sam was ready. His shot rang out, echoing through the valley, and the last predator fell. The forest grew eerily silent. Sam lowered his rifle, breathing heavily as he surveyed the battlefield. The survivors stood, exhausted but alive, their faces marked by sweat and blood. The predators were dead, their bodies scattered across the clearing. The forest was theirs, for now. Sam turned to the others, his voice hoarse but filled with pride. "We've won, but this is just the beginning." And deep down, Sam knew that the fight wasn't over. Not yet. The stillness of the forests seemed to press in on them as the last predator's body crumpled to the ground. The battle was over, but the war, Sam knew, was far from won. The survivors stood amidst the carnage, their breathing ragged, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat. There was no time to rest. They had won today, but they hadn't stopped the invasion. They had only delayed it. Sam surveyed the clearing, taking in the sight of the fallen predators. It was a small victory, but a significant one. He let out a long breath, his mind still whirling with plans, possibilities, and the risks that lay ahead. The survivors had done something remarkable, fighting back, outsmarting a force that should have been invincible. But Sam knew better than anyone, no one could keep running forever. Sooner or later, the predators would regroup, and when they did, they would come with overwhelming force. "We've got to move," Sam said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion gnawing at him. "They'll send more, and we need to find a way to stop them. Permanently." Rolf, who had been standing in silent contemplation, nodded. "You're right, but where do we go from here? We've done everything we can to make them bleed, but we can't fight them forever." Elle stepped forward, her eyes sharp. "We've got the tech. We can turn it against them. The cloaking devices, the energy weapons, they're not invincible. We just need a plan to get to their ship, find the source of their power, and shut it down." Sam thought about her words, running through the possibilities. It was risky and dangerous, but it was the only way. They couldn't keep running from these predators forever. They needed to strike at the heart of the invasion and take out whatever was controlling them. If they could take down their ship, disrupt their communication, or even destroy their command center, they might have a fighting chance. "It's a long shot," Sam said, looking over at Elle, "but it's the only shot we have." The survivors gathered together, forming a rough circle as Sam explained the next phase of their plan. They would head to the mountains, where the predator's ship was believed to be hidden. It was a place of heavy mist and jagged cliffs, difficult to access and harder to survive. But it was the perfect place to infiltrate the aliens' base. They could use the cover of the terrain to approach the ship undetected, or at least minimize the risk of being spotted. Once inside, they would plant explosives to cripple the ship's systems and disable their communications. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore," Sam said, his gaze sweeping across the group. We're fighting for the future of humanity." The survivors nodded, their resolve hardening. They had come this far. They had faced death and stared it in the eye. They weren't going to stop now. As they set out, Sam couldn't help but feel the weight of their journey ahead. They had taken down the first wave of predators, but that was nothing compared to the real battle they now faced. The predators' ship was a fortress, and it would be heavily guarded. Even with all their ingenuity, they would need a miracle to make it through. But as they trekked through the dense forest, Sam allowed himself a brief moment of hope. They had done the impossible once before. They had turned the predators' own strength against them. And now they had one more shot to end this war. "We'll make it," Sam said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. "We'll end this." The group moved onward through the thick woods, knowing that the hardest part of their fight lay ahead. But they had each other, and they had the fire of survival burning in their hearts. They were no longer prey. They were the hunters, and the predators had no idea what was coming for them.